And we're back at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College, and this is where day 2 of testimony from Witness A continues. Yesterday, it was a harrowing account of the events in April 2024 when an engineer, a hitherto unknown engineer called Armand Swart, was slain outside his work premises. And it cracked open another web of intrigue that becomes the central focus of a testimony that drags in and pulls in so many names that are already familiar to South Africans in respect of alleged crime, names such as Katie Molefe and corruption linked to the Transnet rail freight contract, which then swept up the character of Armand Swart, who was murdered outside his work premises. During the course of those investigations, Witness A telling the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry how their investigations unfolded, including arrests of a detective or one of the investigators in the Johannesburg Central Police Unit, who was arrested in connection with Armand Swart's murder on the morning of that murder, not more than 2 hours after the commission of that heinous act. Other names are emerging this morning as well, and we'll become familiar with those a little bit later on. But Aldred de Klerk is following these developments with us. Aldred, in that testimony yesterday during the course of his investigation, Witness X really laying bare what it takes for an investigator under these circumstances to do their work, because it also involves members of their own, members of the South African Police Service, to the point where ultimately he says one of the senior members, the head of the Organised Crime Division of the Hawks, this is Major General Richard Shiburi, calls them into a meeting, these investigators, and ostensibly offers them a bribe, but not in a direct way, in a subtle way. Let's listen to how his testimony in respect of this unfolded.
I would not expect our senior to even have this conversation with us, but if he was going to, it would be to advise us not to take any bribes that we may be offered in exchange of compromising the investigation. He did not do so. In my view, even though he did not expressly say so, I left that meeting feeling that General Shibiri was firstly trying to find out what evidence we had that linked the suspects to the murder and how strong our case was at the time. And secondly, to bait us to see if we could be influenced, hence the reference to the envelopes being available. It seems to me that if we were not agreeable to take the envelopes, which was indeed the case, then technically he did not offer us a bribe.
Aldred de Klerk, I want to bring you in at this point, and this certainly was an eye-opener into the modalities of how things like these tend to happen within the police service, especially those who are investigating individuals alleged to be incredibly powerful and connected.
Indeed, Iman, and we are grateful to officers like Witness A, because it speaks to the fact that we can't be condemning the entirety of the institution of the police nor the judiciary. It also speaks to the fact, Iman, that there are rules about trying to influence a criminal case. So now those tasked with leading the police need to, and we hope that they've been listening, need to consider what do they do next. Because justice in the main is supposed to be blind. Justice is about due and fair process. And anybody who seeks to derail or in any way influence a criminal case is themselves guilty of a crime. And the very allegation that these officers make can't be easy for them, because they understand the consequences of actually speaking up against your own.
And in fact, Witness A, B and C are all active members of the South African Police Service. They are giving their testimony from safe houses. We recall what Witness A told the Commission yesterday in respect of that first appearance of one of their own, and this is Michael Pule Tau, a former police officer who is also part of those who were accused in the murder of Armand Swart, the accused mastermind in this, or allegedly part of this criminal team that was involved in that murder and and a series of other dodgy things that were going on. The issue, though, Eldred, is on who else needs to be a part of this, or who else needs to have questions asked of them. And I think it's people like the NPA, it is the Public Service Commission, it is the Civilian Secretariat on Police. This is about more than just those members and individuals identified in Witness A's testimony yesterday.
Absolutely, because these entities and these state departments you mentioned, Iman, correctly so, are tasked with ensuring that officers and public servants act ethically, that they uphold their constitutional obligation to respect and work within the confines of the law, that their conduct is beyond reproach, and more importantly, that they speak to ensure that the governance and the monitoring of the performance of these public servants actually is ongoing. They also govern the relationship between the executive and the public servant. So part of the very heart of this inquiry is political overreach and undue political interference. So these departments that you mentioned, and it's worth us keeping it in mind, now needs to basically huddle with the Madlanka Commission, because they're also going to be the very departments who's going to be tasked with implementing any recommendations that might come from the Commission.
I want to bring in Ziyanda Ngobo, who was watching this unfold right in front of her very eyes inside the Madlanka Commission yesterday, which is where we are at this morning. And Ziyanda, you put it so well yesterday in terms of the way the murder of Armand Swart opened a Pandora's box of allegations, serious fingers being pointed at senior members of police, the connection between the crime scene in Vereeniging that April morning, the arrests in Bramley, which swept up this particular officer, Michael Pule Tau, and a house in Kew, and bringing with that testimony the identification of some new players, people like one Vusi Ndlala, who seemed to know more about police than he ought to have.
That's right. This morning, Iman, there are questions swirling around who exactly is Vusi Ndlala and what level of influence does he have within the South African Police Service? Well, according to what we've heard from Witness A, his tentacles reach the upper echelons of the South African Police Service, at least in Gauteng. So Vusi Ndlala was introduced by Witness A when explaining now the investigations into the Armand Swart murder, which of course uncovered links to Kati Soketi Molefe, this Michael Pule Tau, who used to be a senior police officer at Joburg Central, Wantiego Floyd Mapusela, the alleged hitman, and another fourth man who seems to have been linked to the murder not only of Armand Swart, but the other murders of DJ Somebody and Vintos as well as the attempted murder of socialites and influencer Tebogo Tobejane, which was at the behest of her then boyfriend Vusi Kat Matlala. Now, the topic of Vusi Ndlala comes in where you've already spoken to Eldred de Klerk about those 3 envelopes that were offered offered for a magistrate, a prosecutor, and 1 envelope for the team. That was done, in front of Witness A. But then Vusi Ndlala is someone who is said to have been at their office quite often to assist with investigations. But he also then invited, through Witness A's colleague, invited them to a party at a White House on a hill in Northcliffe. And when they arrived there, this Major General Richard Shibiri, who had intimated and mentioned these 3 envelopes, was also there. But it wasn't just Major General Shibiri who heads up the investigations unit within SAPS in Gauteng. There were also other senior officials which raised alarm bells for Witness A. Listen to this.
Now the colleague called me at around 21:30 that evening. and told me that, and asked me to guess who else is in attendance. Then I said, I don't know because I'm not there. And then he counted to me the people that were in attendance. And then to my surprise, General Shibira has been now joined by 2 senior officers at the very same party, which was Gauteng Provisional Commissioner, Lieutenant General Tombeni, and Brigadier Nkwashu, who is a Deputy Commissioner at Sitibeni District section in the Val.
So it's very important to note those names of Tommy Mtombeni, as well as Acting District Commissioner of Police in Sedibeng, Mbangwangwashu, because Sedibeng is the municipality within which the Val is located. And you'll recall that the murder of Armand Swart took place in the Val. And the inference here is that this Vusi Ndlala was hosting this party, hosting these top officials of the South African Police Service, in an attempt to influence the investigations. And also, this is the same Vusi Ndlala that Witness A says would consistently say to Witness A, listen, let this case go. You know, the people you're investigating are very dangerous. Vusi Ndlala also happened to know and preempt that Michael Pule Tau would indeed be granted bail. Now, you'll recall that Michael Pule Tau was arrested but applied for bail under different conditions, citing a medical condition, that being diabetes, as one of the reasons why he should be released. And Witness A claims that in a conversation with Vusi Ndlala, he was certain that Tau would be granted that bail, and indeed that did happen. So this is what we know so far about Vusi Ndlala, but the detail of how he managed to be ingratiated within the upper echelons of the South African Police Service in Gauteng is one of the aspects that we anticipate will be unpacked further.
An influential riptide, essentially, Aziyanda, that you're talking to us about there yesterday, which just explains how many people might be potentially caught up in the maelstrom. Aldred, bringing you back in, the mention of Vusi Ndlala there and his knowledge that Michael Pule Tau would actually be given bail and then was given bail. There certainly would be questions we'd have of the magistrate in that matter, and it goes back to what Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi was saying about the influence of the judiciary in these matters. So that would certainly be a red flag and cause for concern, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And the Judicial Commission of Inquiry that the Madlanga Commission is have the authority to actually address that head on. So we still got we got a long way to go, Iman, and that is because we now have to have the National Prosecuting Authority, as you've already mentioned, their investigative section, IDAC. We have the Civilian Secretariat for Police, who also have a role to play. And then the Portfolio Committee for Police and the Portfolio Committee of Justice also have to take responsibility for a raft of recommendations that already exist that speaks to the appointment and the performance of senior public officials.
We're waiting, Arabile, to hear who else will be named as that testimony of Witness A continues today. Let us remember and go back to Armand Swart, who is seemingly an innocent in all of this, somebody who died in a hail of 23 bullets in a case of mistaken identity, not being the person directly who raised a red flag with the Transnet Freight Rail about the inflated costs of those springs. I believe those springs are no bigger than my finger, many of which, 8,000 of which were ordered by the TFR and which then was red flagged. We understand the allegation is by one Lucky Molefe, who happens to be the nephew of KT Molefe, who interestingly, according to a News 24 report, went missing on the day of KT Molefe's arrest. So all of this and more hopefully unfolded will be continuing to unfold here at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. For now, back to you.